Hi, my name is Rachel Bella, and this is my presentation over FERPA. So FERPA and our school. What is FERPA? FERPA is referred to as that or the Federal Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and it is a federal law that protects student records. FERPA applies to all educational agencies and institutions that receive funds under any program administered by the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Education. So that's a lot, a mouthful, but what that means is pretty much all public schools are under FERPA. Private schools, it's a little different because sometimes they do not receive any funding from the U.S. Department of Education, which then it's a whole different thing because they wouldn't receive the funding from them. Parents own the FERPA rights of their child until they reach age 18 or they enroll in post-secondary institutions. How does FERPA work in schools? FERPA works in schools by protecting student information and educational records, and this applies to all staff who are working in the school. What are educational records? According to FERPA, educational records are anything directly related to a student. So that seems pretty broad and can be a little overwhelming, but when you break it down and look at it a little bit more like we're going to here, it's not quite as intense as it sounds. It kind of is, though. This includes things such as a student name, phone number, address, family member names. We have Infinite Campus here, so pretty much any of the personal information that you can see and pull up on a student in Infinite Campus, that would be under educational records and would be therefore protected through FERPA. Social security number or student ID number, student's birthday or place of birth, mother's maiden names, and student grades and attendance records. All of that falls under that. So really, if you break it down to make it a little less overwhelming, think of Infinite Campus that we use for attendance and all the information you can get on kiddos in there. Anything that you basically can get access to on those students in Infinite Campus, that applies under here, and that is not information that can be shared and just handed out to whoever. Who can I give that information to? You can give that student information to parents, the actual student, ICE, only if they have proof of an actual court subpoena. They cannot just walk in and demand you hand over a student's records without any proof of needing the records. Designated personnel and law enforcement officers. There's a loophole in this law which says that in the event of epidemic disease outbreak or a campus shooting, the student's personal information could be released to the designated personnel and the law enforcement officers only in this that scenario, one of those. The school a student is transferring to can receive this information as long as parent consent has been received before you pass along that information. You cannot give student information and pass this out to anyone who's not a legal guardian of the child. ICE, as we talked about over here, if they do not have proof of a subpoena, like I said, students under a whole bunch of different laws and policies, they're safe in the school, so they cannot just walk in and demand that information or even demand to like talk to that child. Friends or whole staff when involving sensitive information. Be aware of what you put in emails. I know a lot of us have questions or concerns that we bring up to the social worker here or to our counselor. You need to be very, very aware of what you are sending in an email. And I would ask myself if what I'm sending in an email is it if it were to get out to somebody else or were to be printed off, would I have said something or disclosed some sort of information about that student that might make them or me uncomfortable? If the answer is yes, go find Miss Short, go find Miss Harder and talk to them in person about it instead of email. Also, we've all fallen victim to the reply all. So be aware of that when you are replying to, especially regarding sensitive student information. I really would just encourage you to not put any of it in an email. If you can avoid it because it's not worth the repercussions that could potentially occur if the information got out to the wrong people. And other family members you can't release it to unless you have parental consent by the actual guardians. How do I get rid of old data? So knowing that we have all of these things that fall under the student information and that we can't disclose this information, how am I supposed to get rid of all of my old things? Well, one thing is shred it. Anything that you have that has like student ID numbers on it, address, phone number, old parent contact sheets at the end of the year, shred all of that. And do your best to make it so if someone were to try to put it back together again, they wouldn't be able to. So a lot of the times I take a big Sharpie and I just go over them and then I shred them. Just trying to get rid of that. Other low risk information that's on your computer, you can delete it just simply off of your computer. Just be aware of what you have and make sure that you're not just leaving things out, such as like your grade books and grades. Make sure those are, if they're on paper, that they're secured in a safe place. If you have them on the computer, make sure that we have the whole school drive. We, as educators, that shouldn't be a huge issue, but just be aware of it. And that might be something that you want to move out of the shared new Stanley drive and move it to your personal drive, just to be sure that it is secure and you then know fully who has access to it and who does not. In your classroom, be sure you have correct parent email addresses and are sensitive to the information you send them via email. Please, please, please do not just shoot off an email to Timmy's mom, assuming that's her right email, because you have no idea if that's correct or not. And unless you know, make sure you're also in these emails not sending anything that once again could put you or the child or the parents in an awkward situation. Just be very careful and aware of the information you're disclosing in the emails. Know who your students' legal guardians are. Here in our building, we have a lot of different family dynamics. We have foster kids in the foster home system, all sorts of different scenarios. Be aware of who their legal guardian is. It can be a range of parents can fall under that. Be aware of who yours is so you are not disclosing information that technically should not be disclosed to someone just because they're a family member. So really check in on that at the beginning of the year. That's a great time to refresh your brain and get a better feel of who is who when it comes to the legal guardians of your students. Check the applications you're using. Just because they're free does not mean that they aren't collecting student information and selling it to third parties. This happens a lot more than we would think. So all these free apps that we use, they're great, but double check that you know what they're doing with the data to make sure that it is not being collected by the app, because if it is, that technically is in violation of FERPA. Don't discuss student information with other teachers unless they have an actual educational reason to be discussing the student. Kind of a no-brainer, kind of something too we always fall short with. I know after a hard day, it's really easy to walk across the hall to the other teacher's room and just be like, oh my goodness, you would not believe what Timmy did today, and blah, 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 blah. Just be aware, though, that information you're disclosing about a student really shouldn't be discussed unless there is an educational purpose, or if it's with a short or Miss Harder to discuss social emotional needs and plans like that. This is a great little graphic as a reminder to make sure that we are being FERPA compliant. So as you can see, it's raise awareness, confirm, know the rights, and the compliant vendors. You can take control of that when it comes to the applications, but also that also falls under like where secretaries and principal and the things that they come up with, because it's also their responsibility to make sure that we're getting applications that are not doing things that they shouldn't be doing, or storing the information in a way that does not go along with the guidelines. And now I'm going to open it up to questions. What are your thoughts about this, concerns? And let's have a discussion around what we think about this, what we're doing to make sure we're not releasing, what could we be doing that's better, and just things about how to improve it. And then references.